The bells of medieval France toll through the cold morning air. Castles rise above mist-covered hills. Troubadours sing songs of love and war, and knights sharpen their blades for battles to come. In this world of steel and silence, one woman would wield more power than kings themselves. Her name was Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of France, Queen of England, mother of kings, prisoner of a husband, yet never a woman to be silenced. Eleanor was born around 1122 in the Duchy of Aquitaine, a realm of sun-drenched vineyards, bustling cities, and brilliant poets. It was one of the richest and most expansive lands in all of Europe. Her father, Duke William X, ruled over more territory than the King of France himself. He wasn't just a ruler, he was a patron of the arts, fostering a culture of chivalry and courtly love that would define an era. Eleanor grew up in this vibrant court, not hidden away but educated, sharp, and aware of the power she was born into. When her father died unexpectedly during a pilgrimage, the world shifted. At just 12 years old, Eleanor inherited it all: the castles, the armies, the vast lands, and the coveted title of Duchess of Aquitaine. To the powerful men of Europe, she wasn't a grieving girl, she was a prize, the most strategic, valuable prize on the continent. Kings saw not a child, but a crown, and they scrambled to claim it. The King of France, Louis VI, acted fastest. He immediately arranged her marriage to his own son and heir, the future Louis VII. At only 15 years old, the young duchess from the south became the Queen of France. The court in Paris was a stark contrast to her home in Aquitaine. It was cold, austere, and deeply religious. Eleanor, accustomed to a world of poetry, politics, and power, found herself stifled. She was expected to be a pious, obedient medieval wife, content with needlepoint and prayer in quiet convents. But Eleanor was not built for quiet. Her husband, King Louis VII, was gentle, devout, and more suited to a monastery than a throne. Eleanor was passionate, bold, and fiercely intelligent. They were fire and water. Their marriage was a constant clash of wills and worlds. The friction between them was palpable to the entire court. She found him dull. He found her headstrong and worldly. This clash came to a head when Louis decided to lead the Second Crusade to the Holy Land. To the shock of all of Europe, Eleanor insisted on going with him. This was unheard of for a queen. She didn't just tag along, she raised and led her own contingent of soldiers from Aquitaine, riding alongside them in armor. At one point, she scandalized observers by appearing dressed as an Amazon warrior, a clear and defiant symbol of her power. The crusade was a disaster, both militarily and for their marriage. Tensions flared in the exotic, high-stakes environment of the East. Rumors began to fly back to Europe, whispers of her scandalous behavior, of a supposed affair with her own uncle, Raymond of Antioch, and even of betrayal. Whether true or not, the rumors painted her as a rebellious, uncontrollable queen. The bond between Eleanor and Louis was shattered beyond repair. Upon their return to France, the marriage was a hollow shell. In 1152, Eleanor did the unthinkable, something almost no woman of her station had ever achieved. She successfully sought an annulment from the King of France. The official reason was consanguinity. They were distant cousins, but everyone knew the real reason. They were incompatible, and Eleanor wanted her freedom. She was no longer Queen of France. She was once again the Duchess of Aquitaine, in full control of her lands and her destiny. But she didn't remain single for long. She was still the most eligible woman in Europe, and she knew her own value. Just 8 weeks after her annulment, she made a move that would redraw the map of the world. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. He was younger, more energetic, and far more ambitious than Louis, and soon he would be much more powerful. 2 years later, in 1154, her new husband ascended the English throne as King Henry II of England. Eleanor, the former Queen of France, was now crowned Queen of England. Together, their territories formed the vast Angevin Empire, stretching from the borders of Scotland all the way to the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain. They controlled more of France than the French king himself. Eleanor was at the center of this new, vibrant court. She gave birth to 8 children, including 5 sons. 2 of them would become legendary kings in their own right, Richard the Lionheart and King John. She wasn't just a mother, she was a political partner. She acted as regent, managed her own duchy of Aquitaine, and was a major patron of the arts, spreading the culture of troubadours and chivalry throughout her new empire. But her second marriage, which began with such passion and promise, also soured. Henry II was a brilliant and energetic ruler, but he was also fiery, notoriously unfaithful, and deeply controlling. He had a famous temper and little patience for sharing power, even with his queen. As Eleanor grew older, she was no longer a young girl swept up in events. She was a seasoned political operator, a queen who understood power intimately, and she would not be pushed aside or silenced. By 1173, the tension had reached its breaking point. Eleanor had had enough of Henry's constant affairs, particularly his long and public relationship with a woman named Rosamond Clifford. More importantly, she was furious with his refusal to grant their sons any real authority or land of their own. She felt her children, and by extension herself, were being marginalized. So, she did what no medieval queen had ever dared to do. She actively encouraged her own sons, Henry the young king, Richard and Geoffrey, to rise in open rebellion against their father, the king. The Great Revolt of 1173-1174 was a family civil war, instigated by the queen herself. The rebellion ultimately failed. Henry II, a masterful military commander, crushed his son's armies, and he reserved a special punishment for his wife. Eleanor was captured while trying to flee to the court of her ex-husband in France. For her betrayal, Henry had her imprisoned. For 15 long, agonizing years, the most powerful woman in Europe was kept under lock and key, moved from castle to castle in England, a prisoner of her own husband. A queen, locked away in her own fortresses, while her kingdom and her family moved on without her. Her world shrank to the stone walls of her chambers. Then, in 1189, everything changed. King Henry II died. Eleanor's favorite son, Richard the Lionheart, became the new King of England. His very first act as king was to order the release of his mother. After 15 years in the shadows, the lioness was free. Richard trusted her judgment completely. When he embarked on the Third Crusade, leaving England for years, he didn't leave his kingdom in the hands of his ministers alone. He left it under the authority of his mother, Eleanor. At nearly 70 years old, an age few people in the Middle Ages ever reached, she was effectively the ruler of England. She governed with a firm hand, putting down the schemes of her youngest son, John, who tried to usurp the throne in Richard's absence. When news arrived that Richard had been captured and was being held for an astronomical ransom in Germany on his way home from the Crusade, it was Eleanor who took charge. She raised the colossal sum of money, a testament to her administrative skill. Then, in her old age, she personally undertook the perilous journey across Europe, through mountains and war zones, to negotiate his freedom and bring her son home. She ruled while kings fought. She secured her dynasty while empires threatened to collapse. Eleanor lived into her 80s, an almost unheard-of age for the time. She outlived 2 king husbands and all but 2 of her 10 children. She had survived crusades, rebellions, imprisonment, and unimaginable personal heartbreak. In her final years, she retired to the Abbey of Fontevraud, the spiritual heart of her family's empire. She died there in 1204, a legend in her own lifetime. She was buried beside the 2 most important men in her life, her husband, King Henry II, and her beloved son, King Richard the Lionheart. Her tomb effigy is unique. It doesn't show her in prayer, but lying down, holding an open book, as if reading. A final, powerful statement. She never stopped learning, never stopped thinking, and never stopped ruling. Her legacy is immense. She remains the only woman in history to have been queen of both France and England. She was the mother of 2 English kings, and the grandmother to a web of European royals that would shape the continent for centuries. She was a patron of art, poetry, and the ideals of chivalry. She was called by many the most powerful and formidable woman of the entire Middle Ages. In an age when women were meant to be silent, she roared. She was not just a queen. She was Eleanor of Aquitaine, the lioness of Europe. She ruled kingdoms, defied kings, and raised legends. If Eleanor's story amazed you, subscribe and uncover more forgotten women who shaped empires, started wars, and changed history forever.